No bonus for old folks, huh?
Carson Vickery slid the manila envelope across the glass conference table like he was dealing cards. Rain hammered the windows behind him, making his voice sound colder than usual.
My name's Leonard Abrams.
I'm 60 years old, and I'd worked at Iron Ridge Components for 27 years. In just 11 days, I would have qualified for my $94,000 retirement bonus. But instead, I was in this sterile room, listening to a 45-year-old tech guy tell me my time was up.
Want to know how I turned this betrayal into a victory?
Stick around, because this story's about to get wild, right here on Jake's Revenge. We're restructuring, Carson continued, adjusting his designer glasses.
Sign the severance by Friday, or get nothing. I looked at the packet.
Standard termination papers, a modest severance offer, and a non-compete clause that'd keep me from working in the industry for 2 years. The kind of deal companies push when they want you gone, but don't want lawsuits.
Understood, I said. Thanks for the opportunity. Carson blinked.
He'd probably expected me to argue, plead, or threaten legal action. Instead, I stood up, shook his hand, and walked out.
The warehouse floor felt different that afternoon.
27 years of walking these aisles, checking inventory, training new hires, fixing problems management never even knew existed.
I'd been here when old Mr. Hendris ran the place from a metal desk in the corner.
I'd survived the warehouse fire in 2018, the recession that nearly killed us in 2009, and 3 computer system overhauls that promised to revolutionize everything. Now, Carson Vickery, hired 6 months ago from some software company in Cincinnati, was cleaning house, getting rid of the deadweight, as I'd heard him tell Felicia Tran from HR. Think they could just toss me aside after all that? Here's where it gets good, folks, stay tuned to Jake's Revenge.
I packed my desk slowly.
27 years doesn't fit in one cardboard box, but I made it work.
The coffee mug my daughter bought me for Father's Day.
The small photo of my late wife, Helen, taken at the company picnic in 2015. A stack of safety awards and productivity certificates that once meant something.
Tommy Rodriguez, a forklift operator I trained, stopped by as I sealed the box.
Mr. Abrams, this ain't right, he said quietly. Everybody knows you should get that bonus. Sometimes things don't work out the way we planned, Tommy. He looked like he wanted to say more, but I just patted his shoulder and headed for the exit. The security guard, Pete Williams, had worked here almost as long as I had. He avoided eye contact as I handed him my badge and keys.
We both knew this wasn't about performance or restructuring.
This was about saving the company $94,000 and making room for Carson's people. I drove home in the rain, thinking about phone calls I needed to make. I'd started at Iron Ridge Components when I was 33, fresh out of the Army, looking for steady work.
Helen was pregnant with our daughter Jessica, and we needed health insurance.
What began as a temporary warehouse job turned into nearly 3 decades of my life. The company manufactured metal fasteners and hardware supplies for construction and industrial clients across the Midwest. Nothing glamorous, but steady work that paid well enough to buy a house, raise a family, and plan for retirement. In the early years, I worked nights and weekends, learning every aspect of the operation. When Mr. Hendricks decided to expand from local to regional distribution, I helped design the new warehouse layout and wrote most of the training manuals by hand. When the first computer system came in, I was the one who taught the older workers how to use it. Helen used to joke that I cared more about that place than our own garage.
She wasn't wrong.
I took pride in the work, in solving problems, in being the guy management could count on when things went sideways. Carson Vickery arrived 6 months ago with big plans and bigger opinions. The old CEO, James Mitchell, had retired after 30 years, and the board brought in Carson to modernize operations and improve efficiency. Carson came from a tech company where everything was data-driven, and workers were resources to be optimized.
Our first meeting hadn't gone well.
Carson called it a strategic alignment session, but it felt like an interrogation. He'd asked why we still used paper logs for certain inventory tracking, why our safety meetings were weekly instead of monthly, and why we hadn't automated more of the warehouse operations. I'd explained that paper logs never crashed, weekly safety meetings caught problems before they became accidents, and automation worked great until it broke down, and you needed people who understood the equipment to fix it. Carson smiled and nodded, but I could see he'd already written me off as another old-timer resisting change.
Over the following months, I watched him systematically push out anyone over 50. First, early retirement packages for legacy employees. Then, performance improvement plans for workers who'd been doing their jobs perfectly fine for years. Finally, outright terminations for anyone who questioned his methods. Felicia Tran, the HR director, had tried to warn me a few weeks ago. "Leonard, you might want to consider taking early retirement," she'd said in the parking lot. "Carson's been asking a lot of questions about your compensation package." I should have listened, should have seen the writing on the wall when 3 other senior employees were let go for performance issues just weeks before their retirement bonuses kicked in. But I'd figured they wouldn't dare touch me. Not after 27 years. Not after everything I'd done for that company. I was wrong. I sat in my kitchen that evening, staring at the severance paperwork spread across Helen's old wooden table. The rain had stopped, but the silence felt heavier than the storm. $94,000. That's what 27 years of loyalty was worth to Iron Ridge Components. 11 more days, and it would have been mine by contract. Instead, Carson Vickery had found a way to save the company money by firing me just under the wire. The severance offer was insulting: 6 weeks' pay and a promise to extend my health insurance for 3 months. After nearly 3 decades of building that place from a small regional supplier into a major Midwest distributor, they were offering me what they'd give any random employee who got laid off. I pulled out the employee handbook I'd helped write back in 2009, flipped to the section on retirement benefits, and read the language I'd personally negotiated with the previous management team. The retirement bonus was contractual for any employee with 25 or more years of service who reached age 60. There was supposed to be a grace period, a protection against exactly this kind of situation. But Carson was new. He might not know about the protective clauses buried in policies that predated his arrival. Or maybe he knew and figured I wouldn't fight back. I thought about calling Jessica in Chicago. She was a corporate lawyer now, successful and busy with her own family. She'd offered to review my retirement paperwork months ago, but I'd waved her off, told her not to worry about her old man, that everything was handled. Pride. That's what kept me from making that call earlier. Instead, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Mitchell Goldstein, my sister's son, a labor attorney in Columbus who specialized in employment law. We'd talked at Helen's funeral 2 years ago, and he'd given me his card with a simple message: "Family helps family. Call if you ever need anything." The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. "Uncle Leonard, everything okay?" I told him about Carson, about the timing, about the severance offer. Mitchell listened without interrupting, asking only a few specific questions about my employment contract and the company's retirement policy. "Uncle Leonard," he said finally, "I think you might want to hold off on signing those papers. Can you scan everything and email it to me tonight? You think there's something there? I think Carson Vickery made a mistake. And if I'm right, it's going to cost him a lot more than $94,000. After I hung up, I made a cup of coffee and sat back down at the table. For the first time since walking out of that conference room, I felt something other than resignation. I felt like maybe this fight wasn't over yet. Mitchell called me back at 7 a.m. Tuesday morning. I was already up, drinking coffee, staring out at the gray October sky. "Uncle Leonard, we need to talk in person. Can you drive to Columbus today?" His office was in a sleek downtown building that smelled like expensive carpet and fresh paint. Mitchell looked more like his mother than I remembered, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of focused energy that made you understand why he'd become successful. "Carson Vickery screwed up," he said without preamble, spreading my employment documents across his conference table. "Look at this." He pointed to a section of the employee handbook I'd forgotten about. Policy 4.7b, Retirement Benefit Protection Clause. It stated that any employee within 30 days of retirement bonus eligibility could not be terminated without cause, and that termination for restructuring purposes during this window constituted a breach of employment contract. "I helped write this," I said slowly. "Back when James Mitchell was CEO, we'd had problems with employees getting laid off right before their pensions vested. Carson either doesn't know about it, or he's gambling you won't fight back," Mitchell said, leaning forward. "Here's what we're going to do. You're not signing that severance agreement. Instead, you're going to request a formal meeting with HR to discuss the terms of your termination. Felicia Tran runs HR. She's good people, but she won't go against Carson. She will if she realizes the company is about to face a lawsuit. Leonard, this isn't just about your bonus anymore. If Carson's been systematically firing employees before their retirement benefits kick in, this could be a pattern of discrimination. That's a federal case." I spent the next 2 hours in Mitchell's office, going over every detail of my termination and the circumstances leading up to it. He took notes on a yellow legal pad, asking questions about other employees who'd been let go recently, about Carson's stated reasons for restructuring, about any documentation I might have. "Do you still have access to your work email?" he asked. "Through Thursday." "Then they cut me off." "Print everything. Every email Carson sent about restructuring, every memo about policy changes, every communication about your termination. We're going to need a paper trail." I drove back to Dayton feeling like I had a purpose again. But when I arrived at Iron Ridge Components Wednesday morning to clean out my remaining files and print emails, Carson was waiting for me. "Leonard," he said, appearing in the hallway like he'd been watching for me. "I thought you'd left already." "Just finishing up some paperwork," I said. "Actually, I need to talk to you." He gestured toward his office. "About your severance package." His office was all glass and chrome, nothing like the comfortable wood-paneled space where James Mitchell used to work. Carson sat behind his oversized desk and pulled out a revised severance agreement. "I've been thinking about our conversation Monday," he said. "You've been a valuable employee, and I want to make sure you're taken care of. I'm authorized to increase your severance to 12 weeks' pay." The new number was still nowhere near my Peru bonus, but it was more than double the original offer. "There is one condition," Carson continued. "You need to sign today, and obviously, the non-compete clause remains in effect." He was trying to buy me off. The question was whether he knew about the policy violation or was just trying to close a loose end before it became a problem. "I appreciate the offer, Carson, but I need a few more days to think about it." His smile tightened. "Leonard, I'm trying to be generous here, but this offer expires at close of business today. After that, we revert to the original terms." "I understand." I left his office and went straight to the warehouse floor. I had about 6 hours before Carson's deadline, and I needed to print every email I could find. By 4 p.m., I had 47 pages of documentation hidden in my truck. At 5 p.m., I walked back into Carson's office and told him I needed more time to consider his offer. At 5:01 p.m., I was officially back to the original severance terms, but by then, I already knew we had him.
Thursday morning, Mitchell called with news that changed everything.
Leonard, I've been digging into Iron Ridge Components' recent employment history.
In the past 8 months, Carson has terminated 7 employees who were within 60 days of major retirement bonuses or pension milestones.
I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. 7.
George Murphy from Quality Control, 63 years old, fired 3 weeks before his 30-year pension bonus.
Patricia Walsh from Accounting, 58, terminated 2 months before early retirement eligibility. I've got 5 more just like them.
The coffee in my cup had gone cold, but I couldn't taste anything anyway.
These weren't just numbers. These were people I'd worked with for decades. George had trained me on quality inspection procedures when I first started. Patricia had helped me navigate the paperwork when Helen was sick and I needed to adjust my health insurance. Mitchell, how is this legal? How is Carson getting away with this?
Because each termination was documented as performance-based or restructuring related, and most of these folks just took their severance and walked away. They figured fighting the company would cost more than they'd recover.
But they were wrong. Dead wrong. Leonard, this isn't just wrongful termination anymore. This is age discrimination, and it's systematic. Carson's been specifically targeting older employees to avoid paying out retirement benefits. That's a federal crime.
Mitchell explained that he'd spent the previous day contacting the terminated employees.
3 of them still had documentation of their firings. 2 were willing to join a potential lawsuit.
And one of them, George Murphy, had recorded a conversation where Carson explicitly mentioned saving money by cleaning out the deadweight before they became too expensive.
George recorded him on his phone.
Carson didn't know, but George suspected something was wrong and wanted proof for his own protection.
Leonard, this recording is smoking gun evidence.
I thought about George, a quiet man who'd worked quality control for 32 years. He'd always been careful, methodical, the kind of worker who caught problems before they became disasters. Of course, he'd have documented Carson's mistakes.
What happens now? Now, we file a formal complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. We request an investigation into age discrimination at Iron Ridge Components, and we file a class action lawsuit seeking damages for all affected employees. How long will this take? Months, maybe a year. But, Leonard, we're not just fighting for your bonus anymore.
We're fighting for everyone Carson wronged, and we're going to make sure he can't do this to anyone else.
That afternoon, I drove to George Murphy's house in Kettering.
He lived in a modest ranch home with a carefully maintained garden and an American flag by the front door. When he answered, he looked older than his 63 years.
Leonard, I heard about what happened to you, he said, inviting me in for coffee. Same thing they did to me. We talked for 2 hours.
George had worked at Iron Ridge since 1991, building a reputation as the most thorough quality inspector in the company's history. When Carson arrived, he'd immediately questioned George's methods, claiming they were inefficient and outdated. He called me into his office last month, George said. The company was moving in a new direction and needed people who could adapt to modern practices. When I asked what that meant, he said, honestly, George, we need fewer gray heads and more fresh thinking.
He said that. I recorded it. Figured I might need proof later. George played the recording on his phone.
Carson's voice was clear, casual, damning.
That evening, I called Mitchell with one simple message: file the complaint. All of it. Let's end this. Friday morning, I did something I hadn't done in 27 years. I called in sick to work. Instead of going to Iron Ridge Components, I drove to Columbus and spent the day in Mitchell's office, finalizing our strategy. By noon, we'd submitted a formal complaint to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission alleging systematic age discrimination at Iron Ridge Components. By 2 p.m., we'd filed a class action lawsuit in federal court seeking damages for 8 wrongfully terminated employees. By 3 p.m., Mitchell had called Felicia Tran directly. I explained the situation to her. Mitchell told me after hanging up. She's been with the company 15 years, and she knows exactly what's been happening. She also knows that if this goes to trial, her department is going to look incompetent at best, complicit at worst. What did she say? She asked for 24 hours to review the employee files and consult with the company's legal counsel. I drove home feeling like we'd crossed a line. There was no going back now. Either we'd win this fight, or Carson would make sure I never worked in the industry again. Saturday, I got a call from Tommy Rodriguez. "Mr. Abrams, something weird's happening here." Carson called an emergency meeting yesterday afternoon, brought in some lawyers from Cincinnati, and today he's been going through personnel files all morning. "Tommy, you need to be careful. Don't do anything that could get you in trouble." "I know, but I thought you should hear this. Felicia's been in meetings with the lawyer since yesterday, and word is Carson's real upset about something." Sunday evening, Mitchell called with an update. Felicia requested a meeting for Monday morning. She wants to discuss a potential resolution before this goes any further. What kind of resolution? The kind where they admit they made mistakes and try to fix them before a federal judge makes them pay punitive damages. Monday morning, I put on my best suit and drove to Columbus. Mitchell had arranged for the meeting to take place at his office rather than at Iron Ridge Components. Neutral ground. Felicia arrived at 10 a.m. with 2 lawyers I didn't recognize. She looked tired, like she hadn't been sleeping well. "Leonard," she said, shaking my hand, "I want you to know that what happened to you and the others was not company policy. Carson acted without proper consultation with human resources or legal counsel." One of the lawyers, a woman in her 40s with graying hair, took over. "Mr. Abrams, my client is prepared to offer a comprehensive settlement that would include full retirement benefits for all affected employees, plus additional compensation for the hardship caused by these improper terminations." Mitchell leaned forward. "And Mr. Vickery's employment status?" The lawyer exchanged glances with Felicia. "Mr. Vickery is no longer with Iron Ridge Components. His termination was effective as of close of business Friday." I felt something loosen in my chest. Carson was gone. "The board of directors has asked me to personally apologize to you and the other employees who were wrongfully terminated," Felicia continued. "This was a serious failure in our oversight, and we're committed to making it right." We spent the next 3 hours negotiating details. By the end of the meeting, I had my $94,000 retirement bonus, plus interest. I had 2 years of deferred retirement contributions that the company had been quietly holding iterated over the years, and I had a formal apology that would go in my personnel file. More importantly, George Murphy and the 6 other terminated employees would receive similar compensation. As we left the building, Mitchell put his hand on my shoulder. "Uncle Leonard, Carson Vickery just learned that some old-timers know exactly how to fight back." Tuesday morning, I received a call from James Mitchell, the former CEO of Iron Ridge Components. "Leonard, I heard about what happened with Carson. I'm sorry. That's not the kind of company we built. It's being handled, Mr. Mitchell." "I know." Felicia filled me in. "The board asked me to come back as interim CEO while they search for Carson's replacement. I wanted to call and ask if you'd consider staying on. We need someone with your experience to help get things back on track." I looked out my kitchen window at the maple tree Helen had planted when we first bought the house. Its leaves were turning golden red, ready for winter. "I appreciate the offer, but I think it's time for me to retire properly." I understand. But Leonard, I want you to know something.
The board is implementing new policies to make sure this never happens again.
No employee within 60 days of retirement eligibility can be terminated without board approval. And we're requiring all senior management to complete training on age discrimination and employment law.
That's good to hear.
There's something else. The board voted to name the new employee protection policy after you. The Leonard Abrams Fair Employment Protection Policy. It'll be part of every new employee orientation.
Wednesday afternoon, I drove to Iron Ridge Components one last time, not to clean out my desk or turn in equipment, but to pick up my final retirement paperwork and bonus check.
Felicia met me in the lobby. She handed me an envelope and a small wooden plaque.
"From all of us who are staying," she said, "thank you for fighting for what was right." The plaque read, "Leonard Abrams, 27 years of dedicated service, a man who stood up for all of us."
I walked through the warehouse one more time.
Tommy Rodriguez and several other workers stopped their tasks to shake my hand. They knew what had happened, and they knew Carson was gone.
"You did it, Mr. Abrams," Tommy said.
"You got that bastard."
"We all did it, Tommy. Don't let anyone push you around like that again."
Thursday morning, I deposited my retirement bonus and back contributions, $137,412. Not just the money Carson tried to steal, but everything the company had quietly deferred over the years. I spent the afternoon at the bank, meeting with a financial advisor about my actual retirement. For the first time in months, I could plan for the future without worrying about legal bills or finding another job at 60. Friday, I got a call from George Murphy.
"Leonard, I wanted to thank you.
Got my check yesterday, plus interest. Carson cost me 3 months of retirement, but now I'm better off than if he'd never messed with me in the first place."
"What are you going to do now, George?" "My grandson's been asking me to teach him about woodworking. Think I'll build him a treehouse." That weekend, Jessica drove down from Chicago with her family.
We had dinner at the kitchen table where I'd first read Carson's severance papers. My grandson played with toy cars on the floor while we talked.
"Dad, I'm proud of you for fighting back," Jessica said. "Mom would have been proud, too." I thought about Helen, about the plans we'd made for retirement.
She'd wanted to travel, to see the national parks, to spend time with our grandchildren without worrying about work schedules. "I think I'm going to buy an RV," I told Jessica.
"Really? Your mother always wanted to see the Grand Canyon."
Sunday evening, I sat on my back porch with a beer, watching the sunset through the maple trees' golden leaves. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear children playing, dogs barking, life continuing the way it should. Carson Vickery had tried to steal 27 years of my life's work with one meeting and a manila envelope. Instead, he'd given me something better, the knowledge that sometimes when you stand up for what's right, you win. Sometimes the hardest fight is the one you thought you'd never have to have, but it's also the one that reminds you who you really are. And that's the story of how I fought back and won, right here on Jake's Revenge.